So welcome to Exploring Spacescapes with artist Linda Daniels Cermak. We're so happy to have you joining us for this talk, exploring the cosmos through artwork is our theme this month. And we're excited to have Linda sharing her artwork with us. Before we get started, I'd like to tell you about a few other programs and events we have coming up. We do our Twilight Tuesdays every Tuesday night, 7 to 9 on Veterans Plaza. Tomorrow night we have hand dancing with DJ Rick, spinning Motown and old school R&B. And then on Friday we have a special concert by Bossa Pella, which is electronic futuristic music. Chris Brown heads up the group Bossa Pella, and they do some really innovative music. And that will be 5 to 7 on El Golfo's patio. So join us this Friday, 5 to 7. And then next Monday, we have a very intriguing conversation, captured, examined, and returned: the folklore of alien abduction. And that will be a talk presented by Smithsonian curator, folklorist Jim Deutsch. So that should be a really interesting talk next Monday at this time, at 7 to 9. All of our events are made possible with generous support from Montgomery County, United Therapeutics, the Arts and Humanities of Montgomery County, Maryland State Arts, Montgomery College, and many others. And now let's get to the program, Exploring Spacescapes, in the studio with artist Linda Daniels Cermak. Linda Daniels Cermak, a printer by trade, began creating her own watercolor paintings after spending 25 years printing other artists' graphic and fine art creations. Linda is attracted to watercolor because of the textures the media can produce through the use of glazes, dry and wet brush techniques, spattering, and scraping. More recently, Linda expanded on her need to explore texture by adding acrylics and collage to her work. The use of a mixed media approach, especially collage, gives Linda the feeling of literally building her artwork. Linda's inspiration for her paintings comes from landmarks, flowers, nature, and space, as well as photographs and drawings, and an active references for her final works. An active imagination for her final works. Sorry, was cut off there. Her collage work incorporates a variety of mulberry and rice papers to a watercolor or acrylic painting. Each collage is wholly unique and draws the viewer into a totally new and different experience than traditional watercolor. Linda recently married and added her new last name, Cermak, to her long familiar Daniels name. Linda is a native of Maryland and has exhibited in juried shows in Maryland, Washington, D.C., Virginia, Pennsylvania, West Virginia. Her work is in the collections of art lovers all along the East Coast. Welcome, Linda.
Thank you. Well, I'm really happy to be here and to talk to you about my work tonight. I'm going to have about a 20-minute PowerPoint presentation, and you can either enter questions in the chat room or bring them up after the presentation, and we'll talk about them. I'm happy to be here and to talk to you about my painting. Let me bring up my presentation and we'll get started. Okay, as you can see, my title of my talk is Spacescapes, and these are my most recent paintings, but I'm going to take you through a little evolution of how I got there from the paintings that I had painted prior to that series. But first, I wanted to point out this quote. I shamelessly stole this from the ad that was created, I guess, by Lisa, but it says, "We are part of this universe. We are in this universe. But perhaps more important than both of these facts is that the universe is in us." Boy, that really hit me. That was really kind of says how I feel about all of this. As I said, I'm going to present about 20 minutes, and I really encourage you to think of questions, and we'll have plenty of time to get the answers. I was brought up during the space race, the original space race between Russia and the United States, and I was mesmerized by the thought of space. In grade school, they would, not only in school, but everywhere, they would stop everything and people would watch the launches. In grade school, we only had 2 televisions in the whole school, so they crowd us all up into a room and we watch these little televisions and look at the launches of the space-related events. I just thought it was fabulous. As a young girl, I'd lay out on warm summer's eves and look at the stars and just wonder about how it would feel to be in space. When I was a teenager, Star Trek was a ritual for me, and I still watch its returns. So I have dreamed for a long time of space exploration and of viewing new worlds. But when I was young, I was a 3D artist, not a 2D. I wasn't a painter. I kind of poo-potted. I didn't think much of it. I did pretty much everything. The picture in the middle is macrame on a bottle that I did in high school.
Excuse me, Linda, we're not seeing your screen.
Oh.
You
it now?
click the green share screen. Put the cursor below at the lower part of your screen and it'll come up, share screen.
Okay. Sorry.
Are you on a regular computer or an iPad?
Regular computer, but I'm
Okay.
not getting a mouse right now. Okay, here it is. Okay.
The green share screen. Is it coming up for you?
I'm going to lower it down and in the show and come down. Now it's okay. So as I was saying, when I was young, I only did 3D painting, not any kind of watercolor, acrylics, anything 2D. And I was just sort of didn't believe in it, didn't think I could do it, and didn't want to do it. The middle picture is of a bottle I macrame in high school. I also did basket weaving, stained glass. I painted on silk. I did ceramics. I did pretty much everything except painting. Then I took an adult watercolor class when I was about 40 years old, and I fell in love with it. And I started painting florals, and for a long time, that was enough. For years, I painted that way. And I wanted to say to people that, work and skip a year. I skipped several years and didn't even pick up a brush. Don't give up. Don't think you can't do it, because you'll either retire or you'll get time to do it after your children are grown, and the love of it will come back. So my first scapes were watercolor. I had been painting flowers and landscapes for a long time, and I finally got interested in abstract painting. And my first space paintings were abstract paintings. The one on the left is Windows on the Universe, and this is from my GeoGem series. They're geometrical shapes, and the colors to me are like gem-like. the windows on the universe. I wanted to get the feel of looking out into the universe through a window and seeing the planets and the stars and everything. An eclipse, on the other hand, it is a space painting because it has to do with the Earth's relationship to the sun. But this was actually inspired by the eclipse in, I think, 2018. I got the special glasses. My family was there. We gathered on the lawn, ate food, and watched the eclipse. And out of that came the inspiration for this painting, Eclipse. Well, after a while, I decided to add in other elements besides watercolor into my paintings, and that also included my space paintings. This one is called Uncharted, and I've added in mulberry and rice papers and other collage papers, as well as cheesecloth. Maroon piece in the upper center is cheesecloth. And I used watercolor brown, which is a special kind of paint. It's opaque, but once you put it down, you can paint over it in watercolor. So I was able to add more textural pieces. To me, the squares were kind of like a map, taking me through this uncharted journey into the universe. And I really enjoyed that. And I did several mixed media paintings for space. These were Space Trek and Up and Away. And they were, again, another iteration in my paintings of space. In both of them, I used a background which included organic shapes and ink and stamping. And in Space Trek, I used stripes to represent the web of space. I had been watching documentaries that talked about the electric waves in space and the electric network in space. And I wanted to portray that in a sense. And so the stripes in the background and the black directional lines are the web of space. Up and Away goes right back to those launch pads when I was in elementary school, watching them take off in the spaceship. The directional arrows were meant to lead you right up into the sky, into the stratosphere, and take you off into this unknown element of space. Again, I continue to add things and experiment with things. As an artist, I often paint small paintings to experiment with different techniques, and then maybe or maybe not use them in larger works. And they also are a nice warm-up exercise. So this is just a very small 4x8 mixed media painting. But what I liked about it was the use of white ink. This is white Dr. P.H. Martin's bleed-proof ink. And the good thing about that is it can be watered down and painted as a cloud-like substance over the planets, for instance. But it can also be used as a thicker substance, and that's what I did around the planet in Planet. And it's a very thick ink there. And if you saw the original, you could actually feel the texture that the ink adds, but you can still see in some instances on the painting that it is texturized by that white ink. In space, this is the only painting that I've done on a canvas. I used acrylic ink, and I took another watercolor painting and cut out circles and triangles and things and pasted them down to give me the feel of space. And then I used a substance called tar gel, which is clear, and covered up parts of it and used gold pigment on top of it. So these are all little advancements, little experiments to try to find new ways to portray what I want, what's in my mind about space. Space flight, again, returns to watercolor, but adds some new techniques. For those of you who are not watercolorists, I used math, which is a kind of like a rubber cement that protects the paper and keeps the little white lines in it are protected by the mask, and then the mask is peeled off at the end. I also used a technique called bokeh, which uses stencils and rubs out paint, makes, in this case, circles, but to make whatever was under the stencil. And I used negative painting. If you look at the center circle, the very dark one in the center, you can see that there are light circles within it. All of those are painted around. They're actually what was under that area in the painting before I painted the dark part in. So between those different techniques in watercolor, I was able to create dimension and depth and a feel of movement throughout the painting. Now, I wanted, though, very badly to create more images that were more like the images I was seeing on the web and the Hubble telescopes. I wanted to get more realistic. Not that I could be there, not that I could go into space and see it for myself, but what was in my mind's eye was much more realistic painting. And I thought switching to black watercolor paper would do the trick. So I tried a bunch of small paintings on black watercolor paper, but they did not have the detail or the nuances that I wanted in my space painting. And when you see the iteration that I have beyond the Spacescapes, you can see the difference between the amount of detail I can get in these paintings and what I got in Spacescapes. So here's my first Spacescape painting. And it was called Starburst. And it is on if you're familiar with Yuko paper, it's a vinyl or plastic paper. This is another brand, but it's a black plastic paper. And I'm able to paint on it the way I do using liquid acrylic inks and liquid watercolor. And it's about between 5 and 8 layers. And it involves a tremendous amount of water. If you were to get table level, eye to table level, you could actually see about 1/8 of an inch of water under each layer. So it takes a long time to dry. I have maybe 3 or 4 layers of background imaging that I've taken and used various techniques to make texture. And then the last layers are the watercolor, which is poured on. And there's a bit of serendipity in this pouring. You pour it on and then maybe say a little prayer. You try to manipulate the paper so that it gets the image that you want, and then you lay it down flat and hope that it dries that way. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But it's all fun, and I have really enjoyed this painting method, and this is really much more approaching the realistic images that I was looking for. Now, you see white stars here, really, I just could not pick up in the camera the colors, but there are about 6 shades of pastels for these stars, because if you went out at night and laid on your back and looked up at the sky, some stars would look a little yellow, some stars would look a little blue, a little pink. And so I tried to portray that by making a wash-like paint that each dot, all the dots are different colors in the images. Here's a couple more, Nebula and Foreign Soil. Nebula has about 4 layers of background in it, where I tried to make different textures in the background using acrylic ink. And then I painted on the nebula and the moons, and then added the stars. In Foreign Soil, these are all imaginary. So this is a made-up planet, a made-up moon, made-up clouds. I can't, be in space, so I have to rely on just things like the Webb and the Hubble images as references. But it's kind of like if you were looking at 2 artists were painting a daisy or a flower. They may come up with 2 really different paintings, actually looking at the daisy, because they see a little different color, they see a little different imagery. But I don't have that option because I'm not able to go into space and look. So I use the reference photos, and then I imagine what I think that space would look like, and then I paint from there. Seeking New Worlds is a real example of this last pour, the pouring with the gold and the silver and white colors of the daily clouds in Seeking New Worlds is really an example of this last pour, because you basically literally pour the paint onto the paper and you roll the paper around and come up with a pleasing design, and then lay it down flat and hope that it stays that way. In Almost Home, I'm trying to start a storyline in this one. Think of yourself as traveling like Star Trek on a 5-year journey, and you're going through nebula and you're going through planets, and all of a sudden you see the Earth off in the far off distance, and you're almost home. I can imagine those folks, even though they're just actors, but the trip of going out into space, the adventure, the excitement, but then coming home. We all love coming home after a long vacation or a long trip. So that was what I wanted to symbolize in this painting on this phone. One of my largest paintings is in the beginning, and it's happily in the home of one of my patrons. And it is, to me, the beginning of the universe. When we get pictures from Hubble or from the Webb telescopes, they're looking back in time. They're looking way back in time, light years of time, hundreds and thousands of light years, millions of light years in some instances, when they're going back to the beginning of time. So I tried to think of what would it be like? What would you see in the beginning of time? And the nebula in many of the photos are star nurseries, where the stars are born. Of course, in the beginning of time, you don't have much yet. You don't have very big planets or galaxies or everything. You just have a lot of interest in the sky and clouds and films and everything. And then you have this star nursery in the nebula. And it's a pretty big painting. It's 24 by 36. So when you're looking at it, you can really get a feel for this event. The last painting is the one that was in the advertisement for this show, and it's called Homesick. And again, I keep trying to up the game for creating what I have in my mind. Not only did I do the same things that I've done in the other paintings, but underneath this moon, I added gesso. Gesso is usually used a lot as a substrate under acrylic painting. But in this case, I used it as a source to gain texture. I put the gesso under the area that the moon is, and I used bottle caps and other things to actually create a texture that to me looked like the moon. Then I painted over it with the acrylic and the watercolor inks to get the shadows and the bright spots in the moon and to give it that overall texture. So each step along the way, I've been trying to create more of the images that I'm seeing in my mind related to space travel. And it's never an ending game. I still have about 10 paintings that are sitting in my mind right now, ready to go on the paper when I get the time. This is all I have to show you of my Spacescapes tonight, but I wanted to leave you with one thought. As an artist, you're always, I stayed on two-dimensional art for a long time after I was a youth and kind of decided that I needed to stick with watercolor instead of bouncing around to try to create more proficiency. But I might have stayed on too long. I realized recently these adventures into other media have really enriched my watercolor experience. I recently took a mosaic tile class, and I've taken a couple encaustic workshops. And in each of those things, they have added to my total artistic experience. And I kind of see in some instances how I can utilize my watercolor to create effects like this, or incorporate my watercolor into these things. In the encaustic instance, some of the circles and the chevrons are from papers that are partially watercolor painted. And I've added some of the fibers and some of the mulberry papers and things. So I'm, again, bringing my experience into a new medium and taking the new medium and taking that experience back to the old. So if you are an artist, I encourage you to keep thinking outside the box, to keep taking every activity that you're involved in and relating it to all the other artistic endeavors you're doing, because it really enriches the entire experience. Again, I want to thank you so much for allowing me to speak to you tonight. I really have enjoyed the experience, and I'm ready to take your questions.